Todd Young Online presents Young Tales. Tales for the young and the young at heart. Today's story, Episode 4, The Field of Miracles, from Carlo Collodi's The Adventures of Pinocchio. Now, if the poor marionette had dangled there much longer, all hope would have been lost. Luckily for him, the lovely maiden with azure hair once again looked out of her window. Filled with pity at the sight of the poor little fellow being knocked helplessly about by the wind, she clapped her hands sharply together 3 times. At the signal, a loud whir of wings and quick flight was heard, and a large falcon came and settled itself on the window ledge. "What do you command, my charming fairy?" asked the falcon, bending his beak in deep reverence. For it must be known that, after all, the lovely maiden with azure hair was none other than a very kind fairy who had lived for more than 1,000 years in the vicinity of the forest. "You see that marionette hanging from the limb of that giant oak tree?" "I see him." "Very well. Fly immediately to him. With your strong beak, break the knot which holds him tied, take him down and lay him softly on the grass at the foot of the oak." The falcon flew away, and after 2 minutes returned, saying, "I have done what you have commanded." "How did you find him? Alive or dead?" "At first glance, I thought he was dead, but I found I was wrong, for as soon as I loosened the knot around his neck, he gave a long sigh and mumbled with a faint voice, 'Now I feel better.'" The fairy clapped her hands twice. A magnificent poodle appeared, walking on his hind legs just like a man. He was dressed in court livery. Livery? Liver. We'll go with that. A tricorn trimmed with gold lace was set at the rakish angle over a wig of white curls that dropped down to his waist. He wore a jaunty coat of chocolate-colored velvet, with diamond buttons and with 2 huge pockets which were always filled with bones, dropped there at dinner by his loving mistress. Breeches of crimson velvet, silk stockings, and low silver-buckled slippers completed his costume. His tail was encased in a blue silk covering which was to protect it from the rain. "Come, Medoro," said the fairy to him, "get my best coach ready and set out toward the forest. On reaching the oak tree, you will find a poor half-dead marionette stretched out on the grass. Lift him up tenderly, place him on the silken cushions of the coach, and bring him here to me." The poodle, to show that he understood, wagged his silk-covered tail 2 or 3 times and set off at a quick pace. In a few minutes, a lovely little coach made of glass with lining as soft as whipped cream and chocolate pudding, and stuffed with canary feathers, pulled out of the stable. It was drawn by 100 pairs of white mice, and the poodle sat on the coachman's seat and snapped his whip gaily in the air as if he were a real coachman in a hurry to get to his destination. In a quarter of an hour, the coach was back. The fairy, who was waiting at the door of the house, lifted the poor little marionette in her arms and took him to a dainty room with mother-of-pearl walls, put him to bed, and sent immediately for the most famous doctors of the neighborhood to come to her. One after another, doctors came, a crow, an owl, and a talking cricket. "I should like to know, signore," said the fairy, turning to the 3 doctors gathered about Pinocchio's bed, "I should like to know if this poor marionette is dead or alive." At this invitation, the crow stepped out and felt Pinocchio's pulse, his nose, his little toe, and then he solemnly pronounced the following words: "To my mind, this marionette is dead and gone. But if, by any evil chance, he were not, then that would be a sure sign that he is still alive." "I am sorry," said the owl, "to have to contradict the crow, my famous friend and colleague. To my mind, this marionette is alive, but if, by any evil chance, he were not, then that would be a sure sign that he is wholly dead." "And do you hold any opinion?" the fairy asked the talking cricket. "I say that a wise doctor, when he does not know what he is talking about, should know enough to keep his mouth shut. However, that marionette is not a stranger to me. I have known him a long time." Pinocchio, who until then had been very quiet, shuddered so hard that the bed shook. "That marionette," continued the talking cricket, "is a rascal of the worst kind. Pinocchio opened his eyes and closed them again. He is rude, lazy, a runaway. Pinocchio hid his face under the sheets. That marionette is a disobedient son who is breaking his father's heart. Long, shuddering sobs were heard, cries and deep sighs. Think how surprised everyone was when, on raising the sheets, they discovered Pinocchio half melted in tears. When the dead weep, they are beginning to recover, said the crow solemnly. I am sorry to contradict my famous friend and colleague, said the owl, but as far as I am concerned, I think that when the dead weep, it means they do not want to die. As soon as the three doctors had left the room, the fairy went to Pinocchio's bed and, touching him on the forehead, noticed that he was burning with fever. She took a water glass, put a white powder into it, and handing it to the marionette, said lovingly to him, Drink this, and in a few days you will be up and well. Pinocchio looked at the glass and made a wry face and asked in a whining voice, Is it sweet or bitter? It is bitter, but it is good for you. If it's bitter, I don't want it. Drink it. I don't like anything bitter. Drink it and I'll give you a lump of sugar to take the bitter taste from your mouth. Where's the sugar? Here it is, said the fairy, taking a lump of taking a lump from a golden sugar bowl. I want the sugar first, then I'll drink the bitter water. Do you promise? Yes. The fairy gave him the sugar, and Pinocchio, after chewing and swallowing it in a tinkling, said, smacking his lips, If only sugar were medicine, I should take it every day. Now keep your promise and drink these few drops of water. They'll be good for you. Pinocchio took the glass in both hands and stuck his nose into it. He lifted it to his mouth and once more stuck his nose into it. It is too bitter, much too bitter. I can't drink it. How do you know when you haven't even tasted it? I can imagine it. I can smell it. I want another lump of sugar and then I'll drink it. The fairy, with all the patience of a good mother, gave him more sugar and handed him the glass again. I can't drink it like that, the marionette said, making more wry faces. Why? Because that feather pillow on my feet bothers me. The fairy took away the pillow. It's no use. I can't drink it even now. What's the matter now? I don't like the way that door looks. It's half open. The fairy closed the door. I won't drink it, cried Pinocchio, bursting out and crying. I won't drink this awful water. I won't. No, 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 no. My boy, you'll be sorry. I don't care. You are very sick. I don't care. In a few hours, the fever will take you far away to another world. I don't care. Aren't you afraid of death? Not a bit. I'd rather die than drink that awful medicine. At that moment, the door of the room flew open, and in came 4 rabbits as black as ink, carrying a small black coffin on their shoulders. What do you want from me? Asked Pinocchio. We have come for you, said the largest rabbit. For me? But I'm not dead yet. No, not dead yet, but you will be in a few moments that you have refused to take the medicine which would have made you well. Oh, fairy, my fairy, the marionette cried out. Give me that glass. Quick, please. I don't want to die. No, not yet. And holding the glass with his 2 hands, he swallowed the medicine at one gulp. Well, said the 4 rabbits, this time we have made the trip for nothing. And turning on their heels, they marched solemnly out of the room, carrying their little black coffin and muttering and grumbling between their teeth. In a twinkling, Pinocchio felt fine. With one leap, he was out of bed and into his clothes. The fairy, seeing him run and jump around the room, gay as a bird on a wing, said to him, My medicine was good for you after all, wasn't it? Good indeed. It has given me new life. Why then did I have to beg you so hard to make you drink it? I am a boy, you see, and all boys hate medicine more than they do sickness. What a shame. Boys ought to know, after all, that medicine taken in time can save them from much pain and even from death. Next time, I won't have to be begged so hard. I'll remember those black rabbits with the black coffin on their shoulders, and I'll take the glass, and poof, down it will go. Come here and tell me how it came about that you found yourself in the hands of the assassins. it happened that the fire eater gave me 5 gold pieces to give to my father, but on the way I met a fox and a cat who asked me, do you want the 5 pieces to become 2,000? And I said, yes. And they said, well, come with us to the field of wonders. And I said, let's go. And they said, let us stop at the end of the Red Lobster for dinner and cheddar biscuits. And after midnight, we'll set out again. We ate and went to sleep. When I awoke, they were gone. And I started out in the darkness all alone. But on the road, I met 2 assassins dressed in black coal sacks who said to me, your money or your life. And I said, I haven't any money. For you see, I had put the money under my tongue. And one of them tried to put his hand in my mouth, and I bit it off and spat it out. But it wasn't a hand; it was a cat's paw. And they ran after me, and I ran and ran till at last they caught me and tied my neck to the rope with the rope and hanged me to a tree, saying, "Tomorrow we'll come back for you, and you'll be dead, and your mouth will be open, and then we'll take the gold pieces. And now that you have hidden under your tongue, where are the gold pieces now?" The fairy asked. "I lost them," answered Pinocchio. But he told a lie, for he had them in his pocket. As he spoke, his nose, long though it was, became at least 2 inches longer. "And where did you lose them?" "In the wood nearby." At this second lie, his nose grew a few more inches. "If you lost them in the nearby wood," said the fairy, "we'll look for them and find them, for everything that is lost there is always found." "Ah, now I remember," replied the marionette, becoming more and more confused. I did not lose the gold pieces, but I swallowed them when I drank the medicine." At this third lie, his nose became longer than ever, so long that even he could not turn around. If he turned to the right, he knocked it against the bed or into the window panes, and if he turned to the left, he struck the walls or the door. If he raised it a bit, he almost put the fairy's eyes out. Excuse me. The fairy sat looking at him and laughing. "Why do you laugh?" the marionette asked her, worried now at the sight of his growing nose. "I am laughing at your lies." "How do you know I'm lying?" "Lies, my boy, are known in a moment. There are 2 kinds of lies. Lies with short legs and lies with long noses. Yours just now happen to have long noses." Pinocchio, not knowing where to hide his shame, tried to escape from the room, but his nose had become so long that he could not get it out of the door. Crying as if his heart would break, the marionette mourned for hours over the length of his nose. No matter how he tried, it would not go through the door. The fairy showed no pity toward him, as she was trying to teach him a good lesson, so that he would stop telling lies, the worst habit any boy may acquire. But when she saw him, pale with fright and with his eyes half out of his head from terror, she began to feel sorry for him and clapped her hands together. 1,000 woodpeckers flew in through the window and settled themselves on Pinocchio's nose. They pecked and pecked so hard at the enormous nose that in a few moments it was the same size as before. "How good you are, my fairy," said Pinocchio, drying his eyes, and how much I love you." "I love you too," answered the little fairy, "and if you wish to stay with me, you may be my little brother, and I'll be your good little sister." "I should like to stay, but what about my poor father?" "I have thought of everything. Your father has been sent for, and before night he will be here." "Really?" cried Pinocchio joyfully. "Then, my good fairy, if you are willing, I should like to go meet him. I cannot wait to kiss that dear old man who has suffered so much for my sake." "Surely, go ahead. But be careful not to lose your way. Take the wood path, and you will surely meet him." Pinocchio set out, and as soon as he found himself in the wood, he ran like a hare. When he reached the giant oak tree, he stopped, for he thought he heard a rustle in the brush. And he was right. There stood the fox and the cat, the 2 traveling companions with whom he had eaten at the inn of the Red Lobster. "Here comes our dear Pinocchio," cried the fox, hugging and kissing him. "How did you happen here?" "How did you happen here?" repeated the cat. "It is a long story," said the marionette. Let me tell it to you. The other night, when you left me alone at the inn, I met the assassins on the road." "The assassins? Oh, my poor friend. And what did they want?" "They wanted my gold pieces." "Rascals," said the fox. "The worst sort of rascals," added the cat. But I began to run, continued the marionette, and they after me until they overtook me and hanged me to the limb of that oak. Pinocchio pointed to the giant oak nearby. Could anything be worse? Said the fox. What an awful world to live in! Where shall we find a safe place for gentlemen like ourselves? As the fox talked thus, Pinocchio noticed that the cat carried his right paw in a sling. What happened to your paw? He asked. The cat tried to answer, but he became so terribly twisted in his speech that the fox had to help him out. My friend is too modest to answer. I'll answer for him. About an hour ago, we met an old wolf on the road. He was half starved and begged for help. Having nothing to give him, what do you think my friend did out of the kindness of his heart? With his teeth, he bit off the paw of his front foot and threw it at the poor beast so that he might have something to eat. As he spoke, the fox wiped off a tear. Pinocchio, almost in tears himself, whispered in the cat's ear, If all the cats were like you, how lucky the mice would be. And what are you doing here? The fox asked the marionette. I am waiting for my father, who will be here at any moment now. And your gold pieces? I still have them in my pocket, except one which I spent at the Inn of the Red Lobster on cheddar biscuits. To think that those 4 gold pieces might have become 2,000 tomorrow. Why don't you listen to me? Why don't you sow them in the field of wonders? Today it is impossible. I'll go with you some other time. Another day will be too late, said the fox. Why? Because that field has been bought by a very rich man, and today is the last day that it will be open to the public. How far is this field of wonders? Only 2 miles away. Will you come with us? We'll be there in half an hour. You can sow the money, and after a few minutes you will gather your 2,000 coins and return home rich. Are you coming? Pinocchio hesitated a moment before answering, for he remembered the good fairy, old Geppetto, and the advice of the talking cricket. Then he ended by doing what all boys do when they have no heart and little brain. He shrugged his shoulders and said to the fox and cat, Let us go. I am with you. And they went. They walked and walked for half a day at least, and at last they came to the town called the City of Simple Simons. As soon as they entered the town, Pinocchio noticed that all the streets were filled with hairless dogs, yawning from hunger, with sheared sheep, trembling with cold, with homeless chickens, begging for a grain of wheat with their large butterflies, unable to use their wings because they had sold all their lovely colors, with tailless peacocks ashamed to show themselves, and with bedraggled pheasants scuttling away hurriedly, grieving for their bright feathers of gold and silver lost to them forever. Through this crowd of paupers and beggars, a beautiful coach passed now and again. Within it sat either a fox, a hawk, or a vulture. Where is the field of wonders? Asked Pinocchio, growing tired of waiting. Be patient, it is only a few more steps away. They passed through the city, and just outside the walls, they stepped into a lonely field which looked more or less like any other field. Here we are, said the fox to the marionette. Dig a hole here and put the gold pieces into it. The marionette obeyed. He dug the hole, put the 4 gold pieces into it, and covered them up very carefully. Now, said the fox, go to that nearby brook, bring back a pail full of water, and sprinkle it over the spot. Pinocchio followed the directions closely, but as he had no pail, he pulled off his shoe, filled it with water, and sprinkled the earth which covered the gold. Then he asked, Anything else? Nothing else, answered the fox. Now we can go. Return here within 20 minutes, and you will find the vine grown and the branches filled with gold pieces. Pinocchio, beside himself with joy, thanked the fox and the cat many times and promised them each a beautiful gift. We don't want any of your gifts, answered the 2 rogues. It is enough for us that we have helped you to become rich with little or no trouble. For this, we are as happy as kings. They said goodbye to Pinocchio and, wishing him good luck, went on their way. If the marionette had been told to wait a day instead of 20 minutes, the time could not have seemed to be any longer to him. He walked impatiently to and fro and finally turned his nose toward the field of wonder. And as he walked with hurried steps, his heart beat with an excited tick tack, just as if it were a wall clock, and his busy brain kept thinking, what if instead of 1,000, I should find 2,000? Or if instead of 2,000, I should find 5,000 or 100,000? I'll build myself a beautiful palace with 1,000 stables filled with 1,000 wooden horses to play with, a cellar overflowing with lemonade and ice cream soda, and a library of candies and fruits, cakes and cookies. And thus amusing himself with fancies, he came to the field. There he stopped to see if by any chance a vine filled with gold coins was in sight, but he saw nothing. He took a few steps forward and still nothing. He stepped into the field. He went up to the place where he had dug the hole and buried the gold pieces. Again, nothing. Pinocchio became very thoughtful, and forgetting his good manners altogether, he pulled a hand out of his pocket and gave his head a thorough scratching. As he did so, he heard a hearty burst of laughter close to his head. He turned sharply, and there, just above him on the tree branch, sat a large parrot, busily preening his feathers. What are you laughing at? Pinocchio asked peevishly. I am laughing because, in preening my feathers, I tickled myself under the wing. The marionette did not answer. He walked to the brook, filled his shoe with water, and once more sprinkled the ground which covered the gold pieces. Another burst of laughter, even more impertinent than the first, was heard in the quiet field. Well, cried the marionette angrily this time, may I know, Mr. Parrot, what amuses you so? I am laughing at those simpletons who believe everything they hear and who do allow themselves to be caught so easily in the traps set for them. Do you perhaps mean me? I certainly do mean you, poor Pinocchio. You who are such a little silly as to believe that gold can be sown in a field just like beans or squash. I too believed that once, and today I am very sorry for it. Today, but too late, I have reached the conclusion that, in order to come by money honestly, one must work and know how to earn it with a hand or a brain. I don't know what you are talking about, said the marionette, who was beginning to tremble with fear. Too bad. I'll explain myself better, said the parrot. While you were away in the city, the fox and cat returned here in a great hurry. They took the 4 gold pieces, which you had buried, and ran away as fast as the wind. If you can catch them, you're a brave one. Pinocchio's mouth opened wide. He would not believe the parrot's words and began to dig away furiously at the earth. He dug and he dug till the hole was as big as himself, but no money was there. Every penny was gone, even every gold piece. In desperation, he ran to the city and went straight to the courthouse to report the robbery to the magistrate. The judge was a monkey, a large gorilla venerable with age. A flowing white beard covered his chest, and he wore gold-rimmed spectacles from which the glasses had dropped out. The reason for wearing these, he said, was that his eyes had been weakened by the work of many years. Pinocchio, standing before him, told his pitiful tale, word by word. He gave the names and descriptions of the robbers and begged for justice. The judge listened to him with great patience. A kind look shone in his eyes. He became very much interested in the story. He felt moved. He almost wept. But the marionette had no more to say. No, when the marionette had no more to say, the judge put out his hand and rang a bell. At the sound, 2 large mastiffs appeared, dressed in carabiners' uniforms. Then the magistrate, pointing to Pinocchio, said in a very solemn voice, This poor simpleton has been robbed of 4 gold pieces. Take him, therefore, and throw him into prison. The marionette, on hearing this sentence passed upon him, was thoroughly stunned. He tried to protest, but the 2 officers clapped their paws on his mouth and hustled him away to jail. There he had to remain for 4 long, weary months, and if it had not been for a very lucky chance, he probably would still be there. For my dear children, you must know that it happened just then that the young emperor who ruled over the city of Simple Simons had gained a great victory over his enemy, and in celebration thereof he had ordered illuminations, fireworks, shows of all kinds, and, best of all, the opening of all prison doors. If the others go, I go too, said Pinocchio to the jailer. Not you, answered the jailer. You are one of those. I beg your pardon, interrupted Pinocchio. I too am a thief. In that case, you are also free, said the jailer. Taking off his cap, he bowed low and opened the door of the prison, and Pinocchio ran out and away with never a look backward. Fancy the happiness of Pinocchio on finding himself free. Without saying yes or no, he fled from the city and set out on the long road that was to take him back to the house of the lovely fairy. It had rained for many days, and the road was so muddy that at times Pinocchio sank down almost to his knees. But he kept on bravely. Tormented by the wish to see his father and his fairy sister with azure hair, he raced like a greyhound. As he ran, he was splashed with mud even up to his cap. How unhappy I have been, he said to himself, and yet I deserve everything, for I am certainly very stubborn and stupid. I will always have my own way. I won't listen to those who love me and who have more brains than I, but from now on I'll be different, and I'll try to become a most obedient boy. I have found out beyond any doubt whatever that disobedient boys are certainly far from happy, and that in the long run they will always lose out. I wonder if father is waiting for me. Will I find him at the fairy's house? It's so long, poor man, since I have seen him, and I do want his love and his kisses. Will a fairy ever forgive me for all I have done? She who has been so good to me and to whom I owe my life. Can there be a worse or more heartless boy than I am anywhere? As he spoke, he stopped suddenly, frozen with terror. What was the matter? An immense serpent lay stretched across the road. A serpent with a bright green skin, fiery eyes which glowed and burned, and a pointed tail that smoked like a chimney. How frightened was poor Pinocchio! He ran back wildly for half a mile, and at last settled himself atop a heap of stones to wait for the serpent to go on his way and leave the road clear for him. He waited an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, but the serpent was always there, and even from afar, one could see the flash of his red eyes and the column of smoke which rose from his long pointed tail. Pinocchio, trying to feel very brave, walked straight up to him and said in a sweet, soothing voice, I beg your pardon, Mr. Serpent. Would you be so kind as to step aside to let me pass? He might as well have talked to a wall. The serpent never moved. Once more, in the same sweet voice, he spoke. You must know, Mr. Serpent, that I am going home where my father is waiting for me. It is so long since I have seen him. Would you mind very much if I pass? He waited for some sign of an answer to his questions, but the answer did not come. On the contrary, the green serpent, who had seemed until then wide awake and full of life, became suddenly very quiet and still. His eyes closed and his tail stopped moving. Is he dead, I wonder? Said Pinocchio, rubbing his hands together happily. Without a moment's hesitation, he started to step over him, but he had just raised one leg when the serpent shot up like a spring and the marionette fell head over heels backwards. He fell so awkwardly that his head stuck in the mud, and there he stood with his legs straight up in the air. At the sight of the marionette kicking and squirming like a young whirlwind, the serpent laughed so heartily and so long that at last he burst an artery and died on the spot. Pinocchio freed himself from his awkward position and began once more to run in order to reach the fairy's house before dark. As he went, the pangs of hunger grew so strong that, unable to withstand them, he jumped into a field to pick a few grapes that tempted him. Woe to him! No sooner had he reached the grapevine than crack went his legs. The poor marionette was caught in a trap set there by a farmer for some weasels which came every night to steal his chicken. And here's where we end for today. Young Tales is produced and narrated by Todd Young from Todd Young Online. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe and join us next time for another story. Thank you for your support.